I want to start this class by playing you a sound. That sound was exactly 30 milliseconds long, 0.03 of a second. Now, what did you hear? You probably think I'm crazy, right? Because the sound was so short you couldn't possibly hear anything. But what if I told you that that tiny piece of audio contained more information than you would ever believe? You see, in 1984, a group of researchers discovered that native speakers could detect a foreign accent in just 30 milliseconds. That's right, I only need to hear a foreign person speak for 0.03 of a second to detect their accent. Now, if native speakers are so good at detecting foreign accents, why do we spend all of our time trying to imitate them? The answer is that you shouldn't. This truth and other shocking truths are coming to you in this very special pronunciation video. So let's talk about some truths about pronunciation and accent. Now, some of these truths are not going to be popular, but sometimes the truth isn't popular. But it's really important for you to know that these things are true before you start on your journey to improving your pronunciation. Now, the first truth, and by far the most important truth, is this. You will never lose your accent. Now, just take a moment to really absorb this truth, because there's lots of teachers out there teaching that you can do it, and there's lots of students out there thinking that they can do it, but this is just a sure path to failure. And it's not just my personal opinion. All of the empirical research tells us that students who have native-like accents are exceedingly rare. There's more possibility of you being killed by lightning than having a native-like accent. The next truth is that age doesn't matter. A lot of people think that if you learn English from a young age, then you're going to have a really good accent. But if you try to learn when you're older, then you have no chance. Your accent is going to be terrible. For example, look at this graph from a study of Koreans living in the United States. It shows the rating of their accent versus their age of arrival in the United States. And as you can see, it fits perfectly with everybody's belief. The younger you are when you arrive, the better your accent will be. But this graph only shows one thing: age. And when the researchers factored in other things such as motivation, amount of time spent at home speaking Korean, amount of time spent in education, the numbers came out almost exactly the same. Age doesn't matter. The third truth is this: most conversations are between non-native speakers. Up to 80% of all of the English spoken right now in the world is between a non-native speaker and a non-native speaker. Imitation of native accents just doesn't make any sense. The fourth and final truth is this: most pronunciation teaching is bad. An analysis of students' workbooks showed that a majority of them make no reference to any type of pronunciation research. And most English teachers who teach pronunciation have no training in it. So now you know that no matter how old you are, you will never lose your accent. You know that most English conversations are between non-native speakers, so there's no point trying to imitate a native accent. And you also know that most pronunciation teaching is ineffective and it's not based on research. What we need is a system, a person to develop an incredible system that helps us to focus on the really important aspects of English pronunciation. Let me introduce you to Jennifer Jenkins. In 2000, Jennifer Jenkins did something incredible. She looked at conversations between native and non-native speakers in English and looked at exactly where pronunciation caused communication problems. From that, she then developed this table. It shows us the important and unimportant things in English pronunciation. If we follow the things in this table, then we should be able to eliminate communication problems, and it gives us something to focus on in our studies. And some of the things are very surprising and shocking. Let's take a closer look. Professor Jenkins' table has 11 items on it, and I'm going to teach them to you in no particular order, because I'm crazy like that. First, I want to talk about two things together. They are word stress and tonic stress. Now, word stress is where we put the stress, the emphasis, within a single word. And tonic stress is where we put the emphasis in a group of words within the sentence. Now, according to Jenkins, word stress is unteachable. And tonic stress is critical. Now, that might be really surprising to some of you, but now I'm going to explain why. Imagine for the first time in your life you see this word. Now, you're not sure how to pronounce it, so you look in a good learner's dictionary, and it tells you that it has 3 syllables, and the stress is on the final part. Japanese. Okay, great. So maybe now you spend some time memorizing the stress in this word. Japanese, Japanese. And maybe you memorize other words. You memorize their stress. But now let me show you why it doesn't work. You see, we very rarely use words in isolation. We normally use words in connected speech, where they are combined with other words. And when they are, the position of the stress changes. In these examples, in the first one, we follow the original example from the dictionary. Actually, she's Japanese. Great. But look at this one. A Japanese ship owner. Our stress has shifted here to the front. And finally, oh, I thought she was Japanese. And now, Japanese is totally unstressed. Our stress has moved here. In English, our stress moves position depending on what we are trying to communicate and what we want to emphasize. And that's why Jenkins is right. Teaching word stress is impossible, but tonic stress is absolutely critical. Let's look at some more surprising things from Jenkins' list. Pitch movement, unteachable. Stress-timed rhythm does not exist. Connected speech, inconsequential. Weak forms, unhelpful. It doesn't matter if you don't know what these things are, because they're not important anyway. But now let's talk about some things that are important. First, let's talk about consonants. Now, you will need to be able to produce all of the consonants in English. But there aren't too many of them, and a majority of those sounds can be found in most major languages. So it's not too much of a difficulty to produce all of the consonants. But there is one consonant sound that a lot of learners have problems with, and that's the horrible th sound. But guess what? Jenkins tells us that the th sound isn't necessary. It doesn't affect communication. You can substitute it for a T or a D, no problems. Now, you may or may not know that one of the big pronunciation differences between British English and American English is the R at the end of words after a vowel. Now, in American English, the R is always pronounced. Car, hair. But in British English, it's not. Car, hair. Now, it's best to stick with the American style of pronunciation. So, always pronounce your R's, no problems. Another really important consonant is the intervocalic T. What that means is if you have two vowels and a T in the middle, you really should try to pronounce it as clearly as possible. Don't substitute it for a D or use a glottal stop. Like, for example, the word butter. Don't try to say butter or butter. Much better if you can say butter with a very clear T. Now, vowels. And I'm going to tell you something that will probably really surprise you. And that is, with vowels, the only really important thing is the difference between the long and the short vowels. For example, really making that contrast between ship and sheep, where you extend the length to show the difference in vocabulary. But apart from that, vowel quality isn't that important. It doesn't affect communication, as long as you have consistent regional qualities. As in, you cannot pronounce the A with an American accent in one moment, and then with an Australian accent in the next, and then with an Indian accent in the next. No. If you have consistency in your vowels, they do not have to imitate any native accent. That's fantastic, right? And finally, phonetics. Now, really the only important thing with phonetics is aspiration after a final P or T or K. Now, what does that mean? It means you have to create that explosion of air. And I'll tell you why it's really important. Because grammatically speaking, English is very simple. The only way that we have of indicating the past tense is by using ed. Now, if you don't aspirate after that final t sound, then maybe I don't hear it very clearly. I don't know if you're talking in the present or the past. Did you say walk or walked? Do you hear how that aspiration just really helps with clarity, especially because of the simplicity of English grammar? And that's it. Jennifer Jenkins has given us an incredible guide to where to focus our efforts when we're studying pronunciation. But wouldn't it be even cooler if somebody had created a guide specifically for you depending on your native language? Well, you can say thanks very much to somebody called Laura Patsko, who runs the website elfpron.com. Now, she created this guide for speakers from 12 major languages that shows exactly where you probably have problems with pronunciation. You can find the link to download it in the description box. Just remember that studying pronunciation is not about looking at isolated sounds and repeating them. It's about taking a global perspective of pronunciation where all of the different elements come together to create understanding. Part of improving your pronunciation is wanting to improve your pronunciation and noticing where you have problems and actively trying to correct them. Finally, I want to share with you two really interesting things from the latest pronunciation research. The first thing is that it's really important to have a positive assessment of your pronunciation abilities. Basically, you need to realize how good your pronunciation really is. Because here's the interesting thing. If you think your pronunciation is really good, then it improves because you're more motivated and you interact and communicate more. Communication, practice equals fluency and good pronunciation. And the second thing is that people who have really great pronunciation love the language. If you really want to have great pronunciation, you have to fall in love with English. So whatever it is that's making you feel that angst when you study, if it's the workbook, your teacher, that repetition that you're doing, eliminate it. Once you find that love and that passion, then your pronunciation will improve almost without doing anything, almost by magic. Well, I hope that you found this class interesting. If you would like to support free English education, then you can consider becoming my patron on Patreon, or you can buy some cool Canguro English merchandise. Both of the links are below. I'm Christian. This is Canguro English. I'll see you in class.